are you as a coach, can you understand the person in front of you and how they're physically made up, or what's their
Yeah,
physical makeup look like? And I think we're pretty good at sort of understanding that and going, well, you may be a bit more powerful or you may be a bit more aerobic, so we'll do this and this to really help that individual person to get better.
yeah,
So that there are, lots of things you can do and understand from, if you're not performing as well in races, you're in training, there's lots of simple steps to be able
yeah,
to help
yeah.
with that.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we talk about often like fast twitch and slow twitch, or whatever. It doesn't matter what terminology you use, and it's not as simple as that. But we have some people
No.
who are a little bit more anaerobically adept, and some people are more aerobically adept, and we can test them for that in the various sports, can't we? We can do various things to try to pick up on you know, little ways that we can individualize their training, whether it be slightly harder intervals or easier intervals, whether it's slightly harder recoveries, so they can't go quite as hard on the intervals.
Yeah,
We've got
yeah,
all these little nuances, but actually, I think you can often pick these people up just by chatting to them and
yeah, yeah,
even seeing a picture of their body as well, because
yeah,
fast twitch, more anaerobic people tend to be a little bit stockier because they put on muscle a bit easier. They tend to prefer sprints and short distance events, and they were better at those at school. Perhaps they come
yeah,
from team sports like football and rugby and things like that. And if they fit that, even without testing them, you can quite
yeah,
often have a great idea of where they're going to sit. Whereas somebody who's quite lean, was always winning cross country at school, and blah blah blah, and they don't put on muscle or weight as quickly, blah, and you can just pick up traits, can't you? Where even without testing, you've got an idea as to what background they've got.
oh yeah, definitely, definitely, definitely. And I suppose that it goes back to what you were saying around, training as a group. And yes, we do have group sessions, but knowing your physiology, we can tweak that so it still looks like you're doing the same session, but you're not actually doing the same session because you can tweak the
Yeah,
intensities of it. You might be doing 6 minute intervals and somebody 200 miles away is still doing 6 minute intervals, but the intensity of that can be slightly tweaked, and that's what I would call like personalized coaching rather than
yeah,
individualizing for that session. So you're doing a group session, but it's slightly tweaked for your needs or your physiology. So that's where even though you go, oh, I'm just doing the same thing. Well, sometimes you are, but quite often the coach will tweak those
yeah,
intensities to
yeah.
suit you, really.
And yeah, that's something that we can obviously do behind the scenes. It's nice again when if we can, to actually tell the athlete or the client that we're doing that, so that
Yeah,
they do understand why we're asking them to pedal at a certain effort level or run at a certain pace or whatever. And again, a lot of it's that education that a lot of people see intervals. If you just think of intervals and what it's seen as in the mass sort of media, it's like just your hardest effort for whatever time is on the paper. It's 1 minute as hard as you can, or 2 minutes as hard as you can, and then the recovery is as easy as you can. But what we tend to utilize is a lot more nuance within that. So the intervals are pretty much never ever as hard as you can. We very rarely ever ask for that. But quite often we might ask people to actually work quite hard in a recovery period.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then it just comes down to the education to people to say why we're asking them to do that. Instead of walking, or instead of standing still before the next run interval, we want them to keep moving at, we often use the term float or whatever, but we want
yeah,
them to keep moving. And that's because we want them to keep working aerobically, and we don't necessarily want that next interval to be as fast as they can.
yeah.
And so yeah, that's something that we use, I suppose, behind the scenes a little, really.
Yeah. And especially in running, because what ends up happening is if you're running as fast as you can for more than about 10-15 seconds, um, your mechanics end up breaking down. So you end up running with bad mechanics. You end up running too high a heart rate. You end up running more anaerobically. So you actually make yourself worse generally, rather than running more controlled and a bit slower.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
you're always training a bit slower to get faster, which sounds weird, but that's generally what happens because of those reasons I've said, mechanically and physiologically, you just break down.
yeah. No, that's good. And I think we'll come on to that when we talk about running in a little bit more detail
Yeah.
later.